You call that average human? The alien girl's jaw was on the ground. It hung open for just a second, a flash of disbelief on a face carved from obsidian and fury. Then it snapped shut, her lips pressing into a thin, unimpressed line. She yanked the magnetic cuff binding his wrists, forcing him to stumble forward. The ground was black, glassy rock, still warm from the lava river that bled across the horizon. Her strength was absurd. Every tug felt like his arms were being ripped from their sockets. Jax gritted his teeth, planting his feet for a half-second of defiance. "Hey, easy on the merchandise," he growled, the words scraping his dry throat. "Some of us bruise." Her eyes, the color of molten gold, narrowed. She was tall, a head over his 6 feet, with a warrior's physique that her minimal armor of hardened plates and leather straps did nothing to hide. Curvy, sure, but in the way a predator is curvy, all lethal power and muscle. "Merchandise is silent," she said, her voice a low hum that vibrated through the cuff and up his arm. "It does not speak of its fragility." She gave another brutal tug, and this time he went with it, his worn-out scavenger boots sliding on the slick rock. They were walking through a primitive settlement, a collection of huts carved into the volcanic rock itself, all glowing with the reflected orange light of the lava flows. Aliens, her people, watched them pass. They had the same dark, reflective skin and golden eyes, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright contempt. They hissed and chittered as he was paraded by, a strange, pathetic trophy. Right. Silent. Got it," Jax muttered, more to himself than to her. "Look, whatever this is, you've got the wrong guy. I'm just a scavenger. My ship crashed. I'm nobody." She stopped so abruptly he slammed into her back. It was like hitting a wall of warm, smooth stone. She turned her head, her gaze sweeping over him with clinical disdain. Wrong? No. The Skyfaller was a sign. The Elders decreed the first sentient being found near the crash site would face the trial of potency. You were found. Therefore you will be tried. "Trial of potency? Sounds like a good time," he shot back, the sarcasm a shield he couldn't afford to lower. "Is there a written exam, or is it all, physical?" She didn't answer. Instead, her eyes fixated on a point past his shoulder. A massive open-air arena carved from a shallow caldera came into view, its floor a circle of packed black sand. The lava river ran around its perimeter like a fiery moat. "Your worth will be measured," she said, her voice dropping, taking on a ritualistic cadence. "Your strength, your heat, your will. If you are found sufficient, you will serve. If you are found wanting..." She gestured with her chin toward the jagged, shadowy landscape beyond the settlement's glowing border. "The waste crawlers are always hungry." A high-pitched screech echoed from that darkness, a sound that made the fine hairs on his neck stand up. "Right," Jax breathed. "Waste crawlers. Fucking fantastic." He was so screwed. Captured by a dominant warrior princess on a volcanic hell moon to be judged for his potency. His life had become a shitty, low-budget porno. He met her golden eyes again, a spark of defiance igniting in his gut. Fine. If he was going down, he wasn't going down quiet. "Lead the way, Your Highness." Wouldn't want to keep the crawlers waiting. For the first time, a flicker of something other than contempt crossed her face. Intrigue. It was a tiny crack in her obsidian facade, but it was there, and it was the only weapon he had. The arena floor was unsettlingly soft, a fine black sand that swallowed the sound of his boots. The heat was immense, rolling off the lava moat in visible waves. The crowd of aliens had gathered on tiered stone benches, their golden eyes like 1,000 tiny suns in the gloom. His captor, he really needed to get her name, shoved him into the center of the circle and finally released the magnetic cuff. The sudden freedom was a lie. He was surrounded by a wall of her people and a river of fire. "I am Zelia, daughter of the caldera, of the blood of ash," she announced, her voice ringing with authority. "And you are the Skyfaller. By the decree of the Elders, you face the trial. Prove your vigor or you are ash for the wastes." "Jax, the name's Jax," he said, rubbing his raw wrists. "And listen, Zelia, I think there's been a huge misunderstanding. Where I'm from, we usually buy a guy a drink before we ask him to prove his vigor." A low hiss rippled through the crowd. Zelia's face remained impassive. "Your world's rituals are meaningless here. Here, Survival is the only ritual that matters. You will prove you have the strength to endure, the heat to provide, and the will to serve, or you will be offered to the outer dark. So, no drink then. Jack sighed. Just checking. He scanned the arena. No weapons, no other combatants. Just him and her. So what's the first test? Arm wrestling, staring contest. I'm pretty good at staring. The first trial is a measure of physical dominance, she declared, stepping closer. The heat from her body was almost as intense as the lava. You will be subdued. Your resistance will measure your strength. Wait, you're the test? I have to fight you? A grim smile touched her lips. You will resist me. It is not a fight. It is an assessment. Before he could process that, she moved. She was impossibly fast, closing the distance in a single fluid step. He threw up his arms to block, but it was like trying to stop a freight train. Her hands clamped onto his shoulders, her grip like steel. She forced him to his knees with breathtaking ease. The black sand was rough against his pants. Humiliation burned in his gut. This is bullshit, he grunted, struggling against her hold. It was useless. Her muscles were corded steel under her dark skin. She held him fast, her face close to his. He could smell a strange, spicy scent on her like cinnamon and ozone. Your resistance is negligible, she murmured, her voice a mix of disappointment and scientific curiosity. He twisted, trying to use his leverage, but she simply adjusted her weight, pinning him more securely. This was her world, her rules, her gravity. Lady, you're barking up the wrong tree, he snarled, craning his neck to look at her. I'm a scavenger, not a super soldier. I survive by being smart, not by bench-pressing shuttlecraft. Zelia paused, her head tilted, a genuine look of confusion on her face. Her golden eyes darted around the arena. Tree? There is no tree here, she said, her literal interpretation completely derailing her intimidating presence. And why would you be barking? That is a sound of primitive challenge. Are you challenging the arena itself? Jax stared at her. The sheer absurdity of the moment was a life raft in a sea of shit. He almost laughed. Yeah, he said, deciding to lean into it. That's it, I'm challenging the arena. It looks shifty. Zelia's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in thought. A bold tactic. To challenge the unliving stone. It shows a defiant spirit. Perhaps your vigor is not entirely in your physical form. The crowd hissed again, this time with a different tone. Interest. He'd confused her, and in doing so, he'd intrigued them. It was a stupid, desperate move, but it was all he had. She released one of his shoulders, her hand moving to his chest, pressing flat against his sternum. Her touch was hot, clinical. The first measure is complete. Your physical form is unimpressive. Your frame is slight. Her fingers traced the line of his collarbone. But your defiance is noted. She pushed him, and he fell backward onto the sand, catching himself on his elbows. He felt like a bug under a microscope. Glad my A+ in defiance is making an impression, he bit out, scrambling back to his feet. He wouldn't stay on the ground. Not again. What's next? A spelling bee? I might actually win that one. The second measure is a trial of heat, Zelia announced, ignoring his sarcasm. She gestured toward a section of the arena floor near the lava moat. A series of flat gray stones were embedded in the sand, shimmering with a malevolent heat. The stones are warmed by the lifeblood of our world. We will stand upon them. The one whose will breaks first, whose body succumbs to the heat, is the lesser. Hot rock yoga, Jax muttered. Fucking kinky. He looked at the stones, then at her bare feet. She was perfectly adapted to this place. He was wearing thick-soled boots, and he could still feel the ambient temperature through them. This was a test he was designed to fail, but the alternative was being dinner for something called a waist crawler. Fine, he said, walking toward the stones with a swagger he didn't feel. But if I win, I get to ask the questions. Zelia followed, her expression unreadable. You will not win. They stepped onto the stones simultaneously. The heat was instantaneous, a searing pain that shot up through the soles of his boots. It was far worse than he'd imagined. It felt like standing on a hot stovetop. He sucked in a sharp breath, the superheated air scorching his lungs. He forced himself to stand still, to lock his knees, to not give her the satisfaction of seeing him flinch. He glanced at her. She was stock still, her eyes closed, a faint look of concentration on her face. She wasn't faking it. She felt it too, but she was used to it. This was her element. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Sweat beaded on his forehead, stinging his eyes. His boots felt like they were starting to melt. The leather was scorching. Every nerve in his feet screamed for him to jump off, to run, to plunge them into something cool. He focused on his breathing, a trick he'd learned during long, oxygen-thin salvage runs and vacuum-sealed wrecks. In, out, control the panic. Don't let it win. You tremble, Skyfaller, Zelia said, her eyes still closed. I can feel it through the stone. It's called shivering, he lied, his teeth clenched. My species does it when we're enjoying the view. You lie poorly, she hummed. But you endure, longer than many of my own people would. He risked a look at her. A sheen of sweat coated her dark skin, reflecting the lava's glow. Her powerful legs were tensed. This was costing her too. The thought gave him a sliver of strength. He wasn't just a human failing her test, he was an alien pushing her to her own limits. The screech of a waste crawler echoed from beyond the walls again. Closer this time. A reminder. A motivator. He couldn't fail. He couldn't be ash for the wastes. He shifted his weight, a tiny movement, trying to find a cooler part of the stone. There wasn't one. The pain was a constant roaring fire. Tell me something, he gasped, the words costing him. What do you get out of this? You're a princess or whatever. Why are you personally testing some random schmuck who fell out of the sky? Her eyes opened, locking with his. They burned with an intensity that had nothing to do with the lava. Status is not given. It is earned, re-earned. Every cycle. By proving my strength, I prove my worthiness to lead. By finding a potent mate, I secure my bloodline and my position against the elders who question my methods. So that's what this was about. Politics. She wasn't just a warrior. She was a politician fighting for her career, and he was her unwilling pawn. And what if I'm not potent? He asked, the word tasting like ash. Then my judgment was flawed, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. And I will be weakened. You see, Skyfaller? Your failure is my failure, which is why I will not allow you to fail. The intensity of her stare, the confession buried in her threat, it was more searing than the stone beneath his feet. The pain was becoming unbearable. Black spots danced in his vision. His boots were definitely smoking now, the smell of burning rubber filling the air. He was going to collapse. He knew it. I'm done, he croaked, his voice cracking. He couldn't take it anymore. He stumbled off the stone, his legs giving way. He landed hard on the cool black sand, his entire body shaking with tremors of relief and agony. He'd lost. He'd failed the second test. He lay there, panting, waiting for her judgment, for the sentence that would send him out into the dark. Zelia stepped off the stone after him, her movements steady and controlled, but he could see the strain in her face, the tightness around her eyes. She stood over him, her shadow eclipsing the lava's glow. You endured longer than any off-worlder ever has, she said. It wasn't praise, it was a simple statement of fact. Your will is stronger than your body. This is acceptable. He blinked, trying to process her words. Acceptable? He'd fucking quit. Acceptable? I caved. You reached your physical limit, she corrected. But your spirit did not break. You engaged me. You questioned me. You fought with your mind when your body was failing. This has value. She looked toward a group of stern-faced elders watching from the stands. The second measure is complete. He pushed himself into a sitting position, his feet throbbing with a dull, booming ache. He had survived. Barely. He wasn't sure if that was a good thing. Don't tell me there's more, he groaned. The final trial is the measure of union, she declared, her voice regaining its formal, ritualistic tone. You have shown defiance and endurance. Now you must show submission. You will kneel, and you will accept my claim. You will become my vessel, my consort. Your strength will be joined to my bloodline. She stood before him, proud and imperious, a queen demanding fealty, and something inside Jax snapped. After everything, the crash, the capture, the humiliation, the pain, This was the one thing he couldn't do. He wasn't a vessel. He wasn't anyone's property. He got to his feet, swaying slightly, his legs still shaky. He met her molten gold eyes, and for the first time, he wasn't afraid. He was just fucking angry. "No," he said. The word was quiet, but it echoed in the sudden silence of the arena. The crowd's hissing stopped. Zelia's perfect composure finally broke. Her eyes widened. "You refuse?" "Yeah, I refuse," Jack said, his voice growing stronger. He took a step toward her, closing the small distance between them. "You want potency? You want a partner to secure your bloodline? Or do you just want a slave who knows how to kneel?" He jabbed a finger at his own chest. "Because a guy who just rolls over and says, 'Yes, ma'am,' isn't potent. He's a pet." The gasps from the crowd were sharp, shocked. He was breaking the ritual. He was spitting in the face of their entire culture. Zelia stared at him, her expression a maelstrom of shock, fury, and something else he couldn't name. "You want to see real strength?" Jax pressed, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. "Then don't ask me to kneel. Challenge me. Face me as an equal. If you can't handle a man standing on his own 2 feet, then maybe you're not as strong as you think you are." A dead silence fell over the arena. He had just challenged the challenger. He'd flipped the entire script. Zelia's hands clenched into fists at her sides. Her dark skin seemed to shimmer, the reflected light of the lava dancing over her tense muscles. He expected her to strike him down, to end it right there. Instead, a slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. It was the most terrifying and exhilarating thing he had ever seen. "A counter-challenge," she breathed, the words full of a terrible, newfound respect. "Unprecedented. The Skyfaller will not submit. He demands reciprocity." She turned to the elders, her voice booming with power. "The old ritual is dust. A new one is forged. We will not measure submission. We will measure victory. We fight. The winner claims the loser, body and soul." The elders erupted in a cacophony of hissing protests, but Zelia ignored them. Her focus was entirely on Jax. The thrill of the moment, the raw, unadulterated danger, was a drug. "You wanted a challenge, Skyfaller," she purred, stalking toward him. "You will have one. Bring it on, princess," he shot back, his heart hammering against his ribs. The fight, the real fight, began without warning. She lunged, not with the controlled force of before, but with the full, unrestrained fury of a predator. He dodged, years of ducking out of bar fights and escaping angry creditors serving him well. He was outmatched in strength, but he was scrappy. He was a survivor. She swung a fist that would have shattered his jaw. He ducked under it, the wind of the blow rustling his hair. He came up inside her guard, driving his shoulder into her midsection. It was like hitting a statue. She grunted, more in surprise than pain, and her arm wrapped around his back, lifting him off his feet. He kicked and flailed, his boots connecting with her thigh. She hissed and squeezed, the air forced from his lungs. This wasn't a trial anymore. It was a brawl. A desperate, intimate, violent dance on the edge of a lava river. The crowd was going insane, their hisses and chants a chaotic symphony for their impromptu death match. He slammed his elbow back into her ribs, aiming for the softer flesh under her armor plates. She grunted again, this time with real pain, and her grip loosened for a fraction of a second. It was enough. He dropped to the sand, rolled, and came up in a crouch. She was already on him, her golden eyes blazing. They circled each other, panting. He was covered in black sand. She was gleaming with sweat. The raw physicality of it was overwhelming. The scent of her, cinnamon and ozone and exertion, filled his senses. He saw an opening and took it, diving for her legs. He wasn't trying to hurt her, just to unbalance her. He wrapped his arms around her thighs and pulled. Her balance, so perfect on her own world, was not prepared for the low, desperate tackle of a human fighting for his life. She stumbled, her arms flailing. They went down in a tangle of limbs, hitting the soft sand with a thud. He ended up on top, straddling her hips, his hands pinning her wrists to the ground beside her head. He had her. He'd won. They were both breathing hard, chests heaving. Her golden eyes, inches from his, were wide with shock. She struggled, her powerful body arching beneath him, but he had the leverage. He had her pinned. The fight was over. The silence that fell was more profound than the noise that had preceded it. He had done the impossible. The weak, unimpressive skyfaller had subdued the daughter of the caldera, and in that silence, something shifted. The adrenaline of the fight didn't fade. It changed. The heat of her body under his, the feeling of her skin, the wild look in her eyes. It all coalesced into a different kind of fire. Her struggles lessened, her breathing deepened. A low growl rumbled in her chest, a sound that was no longer anger, but something else entirely, something primal. "You have won," she breathed, the words a surrender and an invitation. Her hips arched against him, an involuntary, instinctual movement. The ritual is satisfied. The victor claims their prize. He was still processing his victory when her meaning hit him like a physical blow. This wasn't just about winning a fight. According to her insane new rules, he had claimed her, body and soul. Her eyes held his, and the raw, unmasked desire in them was staggering. The fight had been the ultimate foreplay. The dominance, the submission. It was all part of it. The scent of her, the heat, the raw power thrumming between them. It was irresistible. The world narrowed to the space between their bodies. The crowd, the elders, the screeching waste crawlers, they all faded away. There was only the black sand, the glow of the lava, and the woman beneath him, looking at him as if he were the fulcrum of her entire world. He should have hesitated. He should have thought about the consequences, about what the hell he was doing. But his body was acting on a more fundamental level, driven by adrenaline, fear, and a surge of desire so potent it eclipsed all reason. He lowered his head, his lips crashing against hers. It wasn't a gentle kiss, it was a collision, a continuation of the fight. It was rough and demanding, a raw expression of everything that had just happened between them. She met his ferocity with her own, her mouth opening under his, her tongue tracing his lips in a gesture of challenge and acceptance. The kiss was a battle for dominance that neither of them wanted to win. His hands left her wrists, tangling in her hair as she wrapped her powerful legs around his waist, locking him to her. The line between victor and vanquished blurred, then disappeared entirely. It was a mutual claiming, a violent, desperate act of union in the center of the arena. The minimalist armor she wore was more straps than substance, and it came away with a few sharp tugs. Her skin was hot, smooth as polished jet, seeming to drink in the fiery light from the moat. He tore at his own clothes, the need to feel skin on skin an overwhelming imperative. The air was thick with the smell of sulfur, sweat, and their commingled scents. It was gritty and real, and so far from any fantasy he could have ever imagined. She was the one who guided them, her movements sure and demanding even in her supposed surrender. She pulled him into her, and a gasp was torn from his throat. It was intense, overwhelming, a feeling of being consumed and completed all at once. From her point of view, the universe had fractured. This human, this Jax, was an anomaly. He had defied the trial, defied her, and in doing so had fulfilled its purpose more profoundly than any supplicant ever could. He had not submitted. He had met her. The physical act was a seismic shock, a resonance she felt not just in her body but in the deepest parts of her spirit. He was not just a vessel for her bloodline, he was a fire that matched her own. Her culture had a word for it, an ancient, almost mythical term, Kor Val, the soul forge, a union created not by ritual submission, but by the cataclysm of two equal defiant wills clashing and merging into something stronger. It was a legend, a myth told to children, and it was happening to her, in the middle of her arena with a sarcastic, unimpressive-looking alien who fought like a cornered animal and kissed like he was trying to steal her soul. The climax was a cataclysm, a silent explosion that rocked them both. It felt less like an orgasm and more like a fundamental realignment of their atoms. In that moment, something passed between them, a flash of understanding, of shared memory and emotion. He saw a glimpse of her life, the crushing weight of her people's expectations, the constant challenges from the elders, her lonely perch of power, and she saw a flash of his, the solitude of his scavenger existence, the ghost of a past trauma he never spoke of, the relentless, dogged will to simply survive. Then it was over. They lay tangled together on the sand, their bodies slick with sweat, the silence of the arena broken only by their ragged breaths and the soft, hungry crackle of the lava. The fallout was immediate. The crowd was a sea of stunned, silent faces. The elders were apoplectic, their hisses now sharp with outrage and fear. He hadn't just had sex with their champion, he had broken their society. He pushed himself up on one elbow, looking down at her. Her golden eyes were open, staring at the non-existent sky, her expression dazed and utterly transformed. The hard warrior facade was gone, replaced by a raw, startling vulnerability. "Fuck," Jax breathed, the single word encompassing the entirety of the monumental clusterfuck he had just created. He had won the trial. He had claimed the princess, and he had a terrible feeling his life had just gotten infinitely more complicated. They were escorted from the arena not as victor and vanquished, but as something else entirely, something new and terrifying to the rigid social order. They were taken to Zilia's private chambers, a large Spartan room carved into the rock high above the main settlement. The guards posted outside the stone door were a clear sign. They were now prisoners of the very situation they had created. The adrenaline had faded, leaving a hollow, ringing silence in its wake. The air between them was thick with a profound and volatile awkwardness. Zelia sat on a low stone bench, wrapped in a dark, heavy robe. She wouldn't look at him. The confident, imperious warrior was gone, replaced by a woman who looked lost in her own home. Jax paced the room, his feet still aching, his mind racing. He was wearing a loose-fitting tunic and pants they'd given him, his own scavenger gear little more than shredded rags. "So," he started, his voice sounding loud in the quiet room. "That was something." Zelia flinched, pulling the robe tighter around herself. "You do not understand what you have done," she whispered, her voice rough. "I broke the rules, I get it. I tend to do that. You did not break them," she said, finally looking at him. Her golden eyes were shadowed with turmoil. "You shattered them. The trial of potency is the bedrock of our leadership rights. A challenger proves their worth and claims a consort to secure their line. It is a ritual of dominance and submission. Clear. Simple. And we weren't simple," he finished for her. "No," she agreed. "What you did, the counter-challenge, the victory, it has no precedent. The elders are calling it a desecration. They say you are a blight, a trickster sent to unravel our ways. They say I am tainted by you." He stopped pacing and faced her. For the first time he saw past the warrior and saw the person. The weight on her shoulders was immense. "Hey," he said, his voice softer. I wasn't trying to." "You were trying to survive," she interrupted, a flicker of the old fire returning. "I know. That is what makes it so complicated. You acted not out of a desire for power, but from a pure, defiant will. In our oldest sagas, that is the mark of a true mate, not a consort." She ran a hand over her face, a gesture of profound weariness. "They want to cast you out, to nullify what happened in the arena. They want to give you to the waste crawlers to cleanse the stain." "Great. So I'm back to being monster chow," he grumbled. But there was no real heat in it. He looked at her, at the genuine fear and conflict in her eyes, and felt a strange, unwelcome pang of protectiveness. "What about you? What happens to you if they do that?" "I will be shamed," she said quietly. "My judgment will be declared void. My claim to leadership will be fragile. I will be vulnerable to a formal challenge from the elders' chosen champion. So your career is on the line because I wouldn't kneel," he said, the pieces clicking into place. "Fuck me." "You already have," she shot back, a hint of her old sarcasm lacing the words. A tense silence fell. Jax walked over and sat on the bench, leaving a careful distance between them. "Look, Zelia, I'm sorry. I was just trying not to die or become your boy toy. I didn't mean to screw up your whole life." "You did not," she said, turning to face him fully. The vulnerability was still there, but it was overlaid with a new resolve. "You changed it. The resonance between us in the arena. The Korval, it was real. I felt it. It is a power the elders have forgotten. They fear it." He had no idea what a Korval was, but he knew what he'd felt. That weird, telepathic flash of understanding. It was more than just sex. It was a connection. He'd seen her burdens, and she apparently had seen his. Before he could ask, a loud alarm blared through the settlement, a deep resonant horn that vibrated through the stone floor. It was a sound of pure panic. Zelia was on her feet in an instant, her entire demeanor changing back to that of a warrior. "What the hell is that?" Jax asked, standing up. "The outer wall is breached," she said, her voice grim. "The crawlers. They're inside the settlement." The stone door to her chambers burst open. Two of the elders, their faces grim masks of fury, stood there flanked by hulking guards. "The Skyfaller has brought this curse upon us," the lead elder hissed, pointing a bony finger at Jax. "The crawlers smell his unnatural taint. He must be given to them, a sacrifice to restore balance." "You will do nothing of the sort," Zelia commanded, stepping in front of Jax, shielding him with her body. Her authority was back, a tangible force in the room. "He is not a curse. He is my mate. The ritual of reversal bound us. An attack on him is an attack on me." "Reversal? There is no such ritual," the second elder spat. "You defile our traditions with your weakness for this." "Creature!" Screams echoed from the settlement below. The sound of destruction. The high-pitched shrieks of the waste crawlers were much, much closer now. There was no more time for debate. "We are bound, by blood and by combat," Zelia declared, her voice ringing with unshakable conviction. "The Korval chose us. You will stand with me and defend our people, or you will be remembered as the cowards who let us fall while you argued over scripture." She didn't wait for an answer. She grabbed a wicked-looking blade from a rack on the wall, a curved piece of sharpened black metal. She tossed a smaller, heavier one to Jax. He caught it, the weight of it feeling unfamiliar but solid in his hand. "Stay behind me," she ordered. "No," Jax said, stepping up beside her. "We did the whole 'you're the boss' thing. It got weird. Let's try side by side." She looked at him, a flicker of surprise in her eyes, which was quickly replaced by a sharp, fierce grin. It was the same grin she'd given him in the arena when he challenged her. "Side by side," she agreed. They ran from the chambers, leaving the stunned elders in their wake. The scene below was chaos. The creatures, the waste crawlers, were horrific. They looked like massive reptilian insects, all scythe-like claws and chittering mandibles, their bodies armored with thick, rock-like chitin. They were swarming through a breach in the outer perimeter wall, tearing at the stone huts, their shrieks deafening. Zelia's people were fighting back with spears and blades, but they were being overwhelmed. Zelia let out a war cry and charged into the fray, a whirlwind of dark fury. Jax followed a half-second behind, his heart pounding. He wasn't a soldier. He was a scavenger who knew how to run and how to hide. But running wasn't an option, and hiding behind Zelia felt wrong. He saw a crawler rear up over a cowering alien child. Without thinking, he lunged, plunging his blade into the creature's softer underbelly. It shrieked, a piercing sound, and whipped its massive head around, its mandibles snapping inches from his face. Before it could strike, Zelia's blade sliced through the air, decapitating the beast in a single, fluid motion. Greenish-black blood sprayed across the ground. She glanced at him, a nod of approval. "You fight with the heart of a warrior, Jax the Skyfaller." "Just trying not to get eaten, Zelia the badass," he yelled back over the din. They fell into a rhythm. She was the storm, a force of nature cutting a path through the creatures. He was the countercurrent, watching her back, taking out targets of opportunity, using his smaller size and speed to dart in and out of the fight. The brutal dance of the arena was reborn here, but now it was perfectly synchronized. They moved around each other as if they'd been fighting together for years, anticipating each other's moves, covering each other's weaknesses. It was the Korval made manifest, their two defiant wills forged into a single lethal unit. They fought until their muscles burned and their lungs screamed for air. The black ground became slick with the crawler's blood. The number of creatures began to thin. The initial shock of the breach had faded, and inspired by Zelia's ferocious charge, her people had rallied. The tide was turning. Jax and Zelia stood back to back in the center of the breach, a small island of calm in the swirling chaos. "They're falling back," he shouted, spotting a group of the crawlers retreating through the broken wall. "We can't let them regroup," Zelia grunted, her breathing heavy. "We seal the breach. Now. Together." They led the final charge, driving the last of the creatures out into the sulphurous darkness. Warriors swarmed the breach behind them, heaving massive carved stones into place, their chants a rhythm of reconstruction and victory. As the last stone slid into place, sealing the wall, a cheer went up through the settlement. It was ragged and exhausted, but it was triumphant. The battle was over. They had won. Jax leaned against the newly repaired wall, his entire body screaming in protest. He was covered in sweat, grime, and alien gore. He'd never been in a real fight like this in his life, and he suspected he had pulled muscles he didn't even know he had. Zilia stood nearby, her blade resting on her shoulder, surveying the scene. Her people were tending to the wounded and clearing the dead. The two elders who had confronted them now stood in the middle of the plaza, watching her. Their expressions were no longer furious, but awed and fearful. She had not only defended her people, she had done it alongside the very alien they had called a curse. She had proven her ritual of reversal was not a weakness, but a source of unimaginable strength. Her position was no longer fragile. It was absolute. She walked over to Jax, her movements stiff with exhaustion. She looked at the grime on his face, the blood on his borrowed blade, and the fierce, protective set of his jaw. "The heart of a warrior," she said again, her voice soft now, stripped of its ritualistic boom. "And the mind of a trickster. A dangerous combination. Says the woman who wanted me to kneel an hour ago." He shot back, a weary grin tugging at his lips. The power dynamic, the tension, the entire captor-captive structure had been burned away in the heat of battle. All that was left was a raw, hard-won respect. "That was a different lifetime," she said, her golden eyes meeting his. The vulnerability he'd seen in her chambers was still there, but now it was tempered with a quiet confidence that was more potent than her previous arrogance. "The elders will not challenge me now. They saw the Korval. They saw us. We are bound." Jax looked around at the lava-lit settlement, at the strange alien faces now looking at him not with contempt, but with a kind of reverence. He looked at the formidable, beautiful, terrifying woman in front of him. His ship was a wreck. His old life was gone, and he was somehow soul-bonded to a warrior princess on a volcanic hell moon. "So, what does that mean?" he asked. "Being bound?" Celia considered the question. "It means," she said, a small, genuine smile finally reaching her lips, "that you no longer have to worry about proving your potency, Skyfaller." He let out a short, sharp laugh. "Well, thank fuck for that. It wasn't a plan. It wasn't a home." But as he looked at her, standing with him in the aftermath, he realized it was something much more terrifying and infinitely more interesting. It was a beginning,